welcome to my channel. I'm Mama Atheist, but you can call me Amanda. Part of my job as a climate scientist involves using field collected data to predict how changes in the climate will affect species within certain ecosystems. Ecosystems are very delicately balanced, and any change in one species population will inevitably affect the rest of the ecosystem it resides in. Biodiversity, which we will be discussing today, is essentially the most important part of any ecosystem, as each species within an ecosystem relies on the rest in order to survive. The more diverse an ecosystem is, the greater chance for said ecosystem to not only survive, but thrive. However, as humans continue to pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we put the balance of every ecosystem on Earth at risk, as the rising temperatures and shifting climate and weather patterns inevitably change the survivability of each species within a system. As one domino falls, the rest are soon to follow. We make choices on a daily basis that affect the future of our planet, whether we can admit this sad fact to ourselves or not. In the 21st century, we are fully aware of the consequences many of our actions have, and much of the time our poor behavior toward the earth can be attributed to plain laziness. I don't feel like walking to the recycling can now, so I'll just throw this one plastic bottle away in the trash. Or I'm not carpooling today because it takes 40 extra minutes to get home with my coworkers. Little thoughts and actions like that most likely happen more often than we realize, and before we know it, our ecological footprint has grown out of control. Most of us think we do enough for the planet. We recycle when it's easy. We eat locally when it's cheap. We buy Energy Star appliances, unless the other brand is on sale. Unfortunately, all of these little cheats begin to add up, and we are doing way more harm than good. Personally, I attempt to be a very eco-conscious person. I try to walk when I can instead of drive. I separate my trash every week. I even find myself picking plastic bottles out of the garbage cans that I pass when I walk my dog, on occasion. My light bulbs are all LED. My washer and dryer are both Energy Star appliances. It's not enough. However, as according to the Earth Day Network footprint calculator, we would need 2.2 Earths if everyone used energy in the same manner that I do. Most of the energy I use goes toward both food and shelter. I'm a single mother, and I do not have the means to build solar panels on my roof or buy a brand new electric car. Even the food I buy is affected by my limited budget, as locally sourced fresh produce and meat are much more expensive than packaged processed foods. My carbon footprint comes to a grand total of 5.2 tons of CO2 emissions per year. Personally, creating a ton of anything comes as a shock to me, but more than 5 tons of carbon dioxide? Thinking about the effort I put into my own carbon footprint, I can only imagine the damage other people who do not bother to recycle or pay attention to how much gas and water they waste are doing. It is no wonder we are in the midst of another mass extinction. Unfortunately, we can only change our own behaviors. As for the rest of the world, not much else can be done. Biodiversity is an integral part of maintaining our planet. Essentially, biodiversity is the wide variety of all life on Earth, from different species to the small genetic differences between individuals of each species. Biological diversity is key to sustaining ecological productivity. Biodiversity is the key to all life on Earth, as it is the variety of life on every level, from cells to genes to ecosystems. There is an abundance of life on this planet containing millions of different species of plants and animals, fungi, bacteria. Each individual species depends on other species in order to survive. The differences between species of all types creates a symbiosis that allows us all to live together, providing for each other in the biggest ecosystem of them all, planet Earth. Biological diversity, or biodiversity, is essential to sustaining all life on the planet, as it is to the variability of life on Earth that allows for all species to live and work together in order to survive. There are numerous tools available to measure biodiversity. Two of the most important parts of measuring biodiversity on any scale is measuring species abundance and species distribution. Together, these two measurements can help show species richness in any given area. Measuring species richness includes measuring taxa, population, genetic features, and so much more. By understanding the different types and amounts of species in any given area, you are able to understand more about the biodiversity of said area. Essential biodiversity variables, or EBVs, are a comprehensive framework of all manner of biodiversity variables in any given area at any given time. Essential biodiversity variables are the derived measurement required to study, report, and manage biodiversity change. The study of EBVs is interdisciplinary, where different sciences are included in the collection and interpretation of data. Ecologists, biologists, environmental scientists, and climate scientists are only a few different disciplines that are involved, helping to get an overall view of the biodiversity of any ecosystem. Getting a good sense of any area's biodiversity can be essential to environmental conservation. To best conserve biodiversity of any area, both conservation and education are essential. First, education is important in understanding how necessary biodiversity is as a whole. For example, in order to feed an entire human population, we need to have diversity in the food that we eat. Depending on only a few plants and animals in order to survive will not sustain our population into the future. By understanding the need for a diverse food source and by educating ourselves on this fact, we are more likely to survive longer as a species. Habitat preservation is another key feature of sustaining biodiversity. There are 8 main environmental habitats available on the planet: forest, ocean, freshwater, grassland, wetlands, polar regions, deserts, and mountains. More than half of the species on this planet can only survive in a singular habitat. Each different type of habitat relies on a specific climate, temperature, and pattern of weather in order to sustain itself. Every species on Earth depends on a specific habitat for survival. Many species can only survive in incredibly specific areas within larger habitats, where they depend on the climate and specific surroundings resources in order to survive. Climate change is affecting and changing the habitats all across the planet, completely decimating some areas with drought, temperature increase, and so much more. In order to protect the biodiversity of this planet, we must be aware of these changes and do what we can to mitigate these problems. To ensure the natural sustainability of all life on Earth, species diversity is imperative. One example of how multiple species of crops are necessary to fight against any natural disaster or epidemic that may threaten one or more crop species. If one species is lost, others are available to take its place and continue to produce food for countless animal species. The Earth is made up of an interconnected web of ecosystems, and each ecosystem is made up of a variety of species that are all dependent on each other. An example of this would be the rabbits who eat the plants, which are then eaten by the raccoons, and the raccoons are consumed by the bears, and lastly, the decomposing bodies of the bears provide nutrients to the plants at the beginning of the cycle. Each species relies on the next for food, habitat, and so much more. Any threat to our planet's biodiversity starts to throw a wrench in a countless number of ecosystems. Even the smallest change can drastically affect all other species living within that system. On a larger scale, each ecosystem is a part of a bigger one, to the point where all life on Earth is essentially connected in one form or the next. The loss of biodiversity can be devastating to all other life on the planet. One alarming example of biodiversity loss is the decline of large carnivores on Earth. Currently, Nearly 3/4 of our planet's large carnivore species are in decline. The reduction of these species means an increase in the smaller herbivores that they normally prey on, as they become less hunted as they once were. The increase of these herbivores causes widespread habitat destruction, as these once controlled animals now roam free to eat as much vegetation as they possibly can. Entire grasslands and forests are lost as these herbivore populations continue to grow, which means the decline of other species who are dependent on the habitats that are being destroyed. Exponential increase of the human population is causing a similar problem. Human beings are multiplying faster than they ever have in all of history. With a world population of well over 7 billion people, there is only so much land and resources available on Earth to sustain us all. In order to make room for all of these people, as well as fill our stomachs, other species must suffer as we build our cities larger every day and wipe out more of the natural world to farm our agricultural products. More so than land use, food security is the main issue sustaining our growing population. Over 100 million tons of aquatic life are taken from the ocean every year to feed the human race. Nearly half of the land on Earth is used for agriculture, with less sustainable land left every year after the use of unsustainable farming practices. Even with all this land used to grow crops and raise cattle, we are using less species of plants and animals each year for food. Currently, we only use about 25% of the crop and cattle diversity of 2 centuries ago. This is another example of extreme biodiversity loss, as we rely on fewer species of food. Climate change is a big contributor to the loss of biodiversity as well. The change of the world's climate, temperatures, and sea level is affecting countless species across the globe in the form of habitat loss, drought, natural disaster, and so much more. It is believed that we will lose more than 1 million species in the next 50 years due to the devastating effects of climate change. In fact, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature believes that over 70% of the species on Earth will become extinct if temperatures rise above 3.5 degrees Celsius, their normal level. That is huge. One of the best ways to fight against biodiversity loss would be to battle climate change. Fighting against climate change is mostly a personal battle where we use our cars less, we recycle more, we walk everywhere we can. However, if humans are going to make a real shift and truly fight against climate change, we need to band together globally. Educating those who do not understand the weight of climate change and what our future really looks like if we do not make the necessary changes is a good place to start. The United States is one of the only countries in the developed world that still debates the existence of climate change and human beings' cause of it. Most of the rest of the world knows our climate is changing and it is caused by human activity, all to be a fact, and they are making progress in the fight for change. The U.S. contributes nearly 15% of the carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere, second only to China, whose contribution is nearly 30%. In order to fight against climate change, we must make a change in both attitude and behavior to ensure the future of our planet. Only we can make a difference. Only we can fix what we have broken. Once again, I am Mama Atheist. Thank you for coming, and remember, think critically. Bye.